Good evening. Welcome to the Midnight Sermon. We're going to be thinking tonight about one of the nameless people in the Bible. One of the things I love about the Bible is that you've got the big heroes and the big names, but scattered throughout their stories are these people that don't get a name check. And they always strike me. Whenever you come across readings where these people are in, it kind of hits me. Who are they? Why didn't they get a mention? Why is there no detail on them? And I guess one of the things that I think about is that although perhaps the writers of the Bible, and there's a lot of writers of the Bible, maybe thought that their name wasn't important, perhaps they didn't know them. And often you'll find actually the Christian legend, centuries later it pops up, that was their name. And you think, well, where's that come from? But the writers at the time either didn't know or didn't think it was important enough to mention the name of the person. But these people were noticed by God. So just think for a moment, who do you know in the Bible? What stories do you know where there's someone who does something or is significant within that story and you never find out their name? We did this one Sunday morning, we discussed this, we've done a short series on it, and it was interesting, all these characters came through from the biblical story. And one of the reasons I like it so much is that these people are us. If you look at the mass of the human race, and even if you're part of a church or part of a club or in a school or at a workplace, there's all these people around that you don't know who they are. You might recognize their face. And the thing is, and here's the humbling thing, they probably feel the same way about you. They're us, these nameless people. Very few of us are the main character. Now, that took me a long time to get the hang of for myself. But they're part of God's story. We're brought up to believe that only people that achieve great things actually are important. The people that are the superheroes, aren't we? They do all this stuff all through their lives. And in the films and the novels or the stories that we read, they're doing all this stuff all the time. And we're brought up to think these are the important people, the people that are noticed. But I guess I've buried enough people in my line of work to see how the most insignificant, and that's in those inverted commas, the most insignificant and unnoticed person has often made such a massive difference in life. Just by being there, just by quietly getting on with loving others, occasionally pushing and shouting perhaps. But very, very few people have been superheroes. We may do one or two things in our lives that kind of flash up as heroic perhaps, or amazing, or remarkable, but most of us live fairly ordinary lives. But we make a difference just by being here. We're not always the movers and the shakers, and sometimes, probably more often, we are the moved and the shaken ourselves. And we are there to be moved and shaken by God. We aren't actors in the play. We're the people that God is seeking out. Now, if you do look at the unnamed people in the Bible, you could be forgiven for mistakenly thinking that most of the nameless people are just the wife of, and then it lists all their descendants. But that's not the case. And also remember, that's not how we read the Bible. We read it properly. We go beyond the Sunday school reading of the nice and the easy to understand stories. We go beyond the approach where you read it as though it was written in the 21st century. And we really really try to see what is going on. So here's one story of one person who you probably have never heard of, didn't even know existed. In fact, you might not even know the micro story they're a part of, because it's an obscure part of the Old Testament. It's actually in the book of Judges. Now, I love the book of Judges. I don't know why. The book of Judges has a fantastic kind of arc, that's with a C at the end, of the storyline. And it's full of mystery and horror and the heights and the depths of human experience, of love and fear and hate. It's a fantastic, fantastic book, Judges. And you can almost pick any chapter, and in there will be an amazing narrative from, well, I think the book of Judges takes place well over 3,000 years ago, before the kings arrived in the nation of Israel. So this takes place when it was a time of great trouble. The kings weren't established yet, and it's a time when the judges advised and guided the chieftains. All the clans and the tribes within Israel were kind of ruling their own, or looking after their own bit, their own corner of the land. And the judges were kind of the nation's leaders. They often weren't elected, they just kind of ended up. Sometimes they were asked to be it, but more often than not, they just kind of walked in and became these heroic figures. Samson is one of the best known ones. Deborah. Trying to think of another famous judge. I can't think of one right now, but there were lots of them. There's a whole book on them. Gideon, I think, was a judge. So it's not a judge as we would understand it now. It's another name for a leader of the people. Now, at this point, the nation had slipped again into the worship of the gods of the land, of the people who were there before them, the worship of the Baals with their sex and sacrifice shrines and the death cults, all the bad stuff that was going on. Now, Abimelech was one of the local rulers, a chieftain. Now, you may have heard of his name, Abimelech. It's quite a cool name, I suppose. But he wanted to be the ruler, so he killed all of those that stood in his way. And that was 70 of his brothers. Yes, 70 brothers. So when people talk to you about Christian marriage, they talk about Bible marriage, traditional marriage. You need to understand that you go back to this point, Abimelech had 70 brothers. We don't know how many sisters he had. So, that's a bit of a step. Anyway, he killed them all, he massacred them. And there was an uprising against Abimelech. And as the message said, the violence boomeranged back onto Abimelech. And he fought back. He destroyed the resistance and leveled cities, and he finds himself smelling victory at the city of Shechem. I'm going to read it. It's in Judges 9. I'm going to read from verse 42. This is good. There's another nameless person in Judges 9 that we're going to be looking at. I don't know if it'll end up on a midnight sermon or not. But here we go. Judges 9, verse 42. The next day the people went out to the field. This was reported to Abimelech. He took his troops, divided them into 3 companies, and placed them in ambush in the fields. When he saw that the people were well out in the open, he sprang up and attacked them. Abimelech and the company with him charged ahead and took control of the entrance to the city gate. The other 2 companies chased down those who were in the open fields and killed them. Abimelech fought at the city all that day. He captured the city and massacred everyone in it. He leveled the city to the ground and then sowed it with salt. This is before the days of the Geneva Convention. So not only did he destroy the city, he made sure it wasn't coming back. He killed the land. When the leaders connected with Shechem's tower, this is the fortified tower in the centre of the city, heard this, they went into the fortified God of the Covenant temple. This was reported to Abimelech that Shechem's tower bunch were gathered together. He and his troops climbed Mount Zalmon, also known as Dark Mountain. Abimelech took his axe and chopped a bundle of firewood, picked it up and put it on his shoulders. He said to his troops, "Do what you've seen me do, and quickly." So each of his men cut his own bundle. They followed Abimelech, piled their bundles against the tower fortifications and set the whole structure on fire. Everyone in Shechem's tower died, about 1,000 men and women. Abimelech went on to Thebes. He camped at Thebes and captured it. The Tower of Strength, which was the name of their fortified centre of the town. The Tower of Strength stood in the middle of the city. All the men and women of the city, along with the city's leaders, had fled there and locked themselves in. They were up on the tower roof. Abimelech got as far as the tower and assaulted it. He came up to the tower door to set it on fire. Just then, some woman dropped an upper millstone on his head and crushed his skull. He called urgently to his young armour-bearer and said, "Draw your sword and kill me, so they can't say a woman killed him." His armour-bearer drove in his sword, and Abimelech died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they went home. Here's the magic of this story. This woman, some woman, as it says in the message, is one of the countless nameless women in the Bible. Why didn't she get named? Well, lots of women didn't. They weren't viewed as significant enough, as important enough. They didn't have status. Who would know what they were, who they were, what they were? They weren't important enough. But this woman ended a war. And not by accident. I don't think she's up on the tower and then sort of accidentally leans against this stone. It rolls off. She goes, "Oops, what's happened there then?" The way I interpret the story, she took that stone up there to defend the tower. And it would have been a big stone. It was a millstone, an upper millstone. She was strong, not some ornament. She was a proper working woman. She looked down and she saw Abimelech down there. And she saw her chance and she thought, "I'm going to sort this out." So she did. Like Deborah and Jael, two other named women, and other nameless people, she took action, and it changed the history of that country. However you read or understand the Bible, particularly some of the Old Testament stuff, this is ancient history written around the time, possibly later, but these were stories of the people's history of their land, how the land came to be. She changed history. And this is the magic. In a society where people were unimportant, where women were viewed as kind of background actors, supportive, baby carriers, domestic servants. So much so, in fact, that the king was embarrassed to have been killed by someone like that. Someone that unimportant. Someone that normal and ordinary. His masculinity was that fragile. He couldn't be beaten by a woman. He'd rather die than people think a woman had killed him. And you see the irony here. You can see God grinning as the story rolls out, as God watches this all happening. Because we all know, and hundreds of years later, thousands of years later, We are still talking about how Abimelech was killed by a woman. And he tried to cover it up. The nameless people, they speak. They speak what's unspoken. They draw out what is unnoticed. God noticed, and she is still remembered 3,000 and a bit years later. This nameless woman is remembered for ending a siege, for killing the evil king. Because when she completed it, they saw the king was dead, the chief, and they just go. That's it. In defiance of the cultural norms, in defiance of being regarded as second rate, she changed history. And history may not have remembered exactly who she was, just some woman. But she was noticed. And she was noticed by God. And God used her to change everything. So don't think you are unnoticed. And don't think you are unimportant. There's stories of Jesus like this as well. There isn't time now to talk about it. There's a story in Matthew 15, which is your homework. Have a read of that, where another nameless woman argues with Jesus, because Jesus says, oh, this is how things are. And this woman says, well, hang on a minute. I don't think so. Isn't God like this? And Jesus is like, oh yeah, you're right. You're noticed. God will use you. All of us are tiny pebbles thrown in the pond, and we ripple out. And as followers of Jesus, those ripples can be of grace and of love and of acceptance and of change. No one actually is nameless in God's eyes. Good night.